Alright, so let's get started. I asked you guys to make some thumbnails for me, and like 3 of you did. Why? Why did the rest of you not make some thumbnails? But it's okay. It's just, I wanted to cover the rules of depth with you guys and how to fill a composition and talk a little bit about environments, which is really, really important. And we're looking at a couple of rules being broken here. Alright, so let's talk about the rules that were broken. These set of trees are... No. Okay. These set of trees are very distant from these, but they have the same contrast, which is wrong. Big no-no. To reiterate, if you guys don't have the rules of depth written to you, or you don't have a copy of them, I do describe them and list them. They're fundamental. Like if you've ever asked for a list of fundamentals when it comes to landscapes, I covered that last class. The video right before this one, I list exactly what you have to do to make something look like it's far away, or to make something look like it's close up. Those are the rules of depth. They're really, really important for executing painting a landscape and getting a read in the thumbnail stage. But the reason why objects of different distances have different contrasts and fade, and we have you're indicating a really, really strong humidity or strong atmospheric fade. You're kind of an overcast sky. The sun is very, very hidden, so it's a very, very I don't know how to describe it. Like it looks like an overcast, cloudy, or foggy day, like a very severe fog. The thing is, if it's fog, that's another point I'm going to make. If it's fog, it sits mostly on the surface of the earth, and you're looking at from a really, really high camera. You're probably in a helicopter. This is kind of like a helicopter view. You know, cinematically, they pull these shots off on a helicopter, and if it's fog, we usually see some kind of indication that the fog is sitting on the surface of the earth. And basically, I'm saying this is too faded here. So this contrast needs to be lighter. This is too faded. You have excellent mid-tone values here. You chose some really good values. But this is not so much atmospheric fade anymore, or the value of the air with all the color inside of it and all the particles inside of it in the way. It's mostly an actual particle, like some kind of dust storm or fog. So this is just a little bit too faded. The reason why I say it's too much is because it seems like from here to here and up, this is the only place where the fog was affecting the landscape. For the landscape to really feel successful, you have to make the same kind of atmosphere happen here as happens there. Unless you have a reference that guides you along that, maybe it's like a gust of storm or something like that is moving in only one section in the distance, that's different. But generally the humidity level and the kind of atmosphere varies between different sections of the painting. Also, the silhouette of the character is very, very basic. It's a very basic shape. Reads less like the head is very large, and the body is very short, so it looks like a toddler in a cloak, and that's why I didn't read it right away. The light source here, shadow. Okay, good job on the shadow. But that's just because this object is in the foreground. His values are so dark, and it belongs to him. Those shadows are appropriate to his position in the landscape, distance-wise. But right behind him, it's very hard to tell where he starts, and we see like a complete separation, like positive space and then negative space. Too much and very, very empty. And these are the kinds of things that you fix from a distance. These are the kinds of things you see when you are zoomed out. So if you guys aren't zooming out, and that's why thumbnails are so important, if you guys aren't zooming out as you design your landscapes, you won't be able to pick up on these tiny little issues. So what we're going to do is discuss scale as well. So this character is very big, and him being very big has made it seem like he's colossal. So in order to make the landscape feel bigger than him, you have to shrink his size. Let me show you real quick how awesome of a trick that is when you shrink the character instead of enlarge the environment. And that's another unit, another principle of depth that I covered last class. So what I'm trying to do here is just like lighten this. So right now you're at that point where everything feels like it's clip art. That kind of pop-up book experience with your landscape, and that's fine. That's really, really just normal. It really happens a lot. But what you need to do, what you need to start doing is sketch in the units before you start drawing them in. What that will do is it'll kind of wrap your head around it being a more volume, like an object with volume. And when you sketch, always keep your mind considering the geometry, so that you're sketching something with volume instead of sketching a flat cutout, a cardboard cutout that feels like a pop-up book. Okay, so I'm completely erasing him. And I'm going to introduce a smaller version of him. So all you got to do to make a landscape look massive is make the character smaller. Look at what that did. That opened up the entire landscape, whereas before he felt, the whole silhouette felt extremely forced and stiff, and it didn't have any motion or gesture to it. Now you don't have to worry about any of that. It's not about motion, it's not about gesture, it's not about the character silhouette, it's not a character design. Now you throw a general kind of like little cast shadow here, a shadow, and a tiny little cast shadow, and you have all that you need as a unit of scale. So I'm sure you guys have heard that whole banana for scale thing. It's basically what we're doing here. You gotta choose a banana, and then that's gonna be your scale. So when you choose the smallest object, you say, okay, I know what a human looks like. I've stood beside a human before. I know how tall they can get and how short they can get. And if this is a human, holy shit, that's a big ass drop. But when he was big, it looked like a little a stream drop, or something that you could survive if you jumped it. So what you want to do is make things feel colossal in a landscape. Always go for the colossal. It's really, really important that you guys try that. Okay, so there's that. I fixed that, and now it's just to do with basic form rules. Yeah, it's tiny, but it's just for the sake of the demonstration. If he had to be big, if he was a giant of sorts, then maybe he would have to be bigger. What I'm doing now is I'm remembering light environments, the lightness and darkness of objects, depending on the environment around. So you've got some surfaces here that do need higher, brighter points in their geometry. And the reason why is because the sky is so bright. It's white. It's pure white. When we have a sky that is that bright, it does show on the objects in the landscape. It does, especially for objects in the distance. Too much contrast. What we want to do is avoid contrast. And when I say contrast, I mean black and white working together to cause a focal point. What I'm doing here is using only white or highlight points to create this. So I'm not using full contrast. I'm using a portion of it, a part of the formula, to make a focal point happen. Oops. Okay. So just some tiny little suggestions that can get the ball rolling for completing this. Another issue is that all of these units look like they're separate from each other. So they all look like they're islands of information between general, like you have no way of seaming them together. They all look separate from each other. They all look like standalone units instead of part of the same environment. And how do you unify environments? By actually blurring the seams. By going in and blurring the seams, because before the water started and the land ended, there was some shallow water, and so that blurs the seams between any land mass and water mass. Always remember that. Blur them together. This happens in a gradient, and a desaturation, and in color change. So sometimes we get more yellowy looking water the closer it gets to sand, or the more green looking water the closer it gets to sand, depending on whether or not this is sand. So actually seam the landscape together. It's foliage, it's rocks, it's earth. So it's like, all melted together. Your cast shadows, because the sun is so strong, should be way stronger, way sharper. And that is another way to unify objects together in an environment. When the cast shadows overlap other objects, like that, when we have these kinds of shadows. Okay? So what are some of the points that I just made? Can anyone write them back to me? Let me use a darken layer. And it is a very, very bright sky. If his cast shadow is sharp, so will this object. The fact that this object is far away doesn't mean that less physics happens on it. Physics is a universal thing. It'll happen in a distance or in the foreground. It doesn't matter. This object can still have a sharp shadow to it. Of course, not as sharp, just because our eyes are weak and they can't see very far away. But you still need that. Surface texture is another way to make things feel a little bit more seamed together. So your brush strokes should be from a distance, and you should be trying to represent some kind of surface texture. Don't go in and try to create micro texture. That stuff is dangerous. But just, you see this cast shadow that was sharp? It wasn't consistent over here in the distance. And I feel like this is way too faded, very similar to the fade happening in these objects here. But this one isn't as far away as this object. This one is miles away, and this one is just a hop, skip, and a jump away from this midground. So this is still technically midground. Blur the seams to make it feel more cohesive, yes. Blur water into land to unify environment, because there is shallow water. Blur the seams for unity, notably between water and land. Small characters emphasize environment scale. Unify environments by blurring edges and having objects cast shadow across areas. Exactly. So you combine the foreground and the background, get stitched together when you combine an object in the further midgrounds, cast shadow with an object in the closer midground. So just throwing a little cast shadow there does a lot for your painting. Then there is the fact that water reflection works as a great representative of how far we are from the sunlight. So let me get the darken layer. This water doesn't have the same amount of brightness as it does far away. It's much darker, significantly darker. And when it does get closer to the light source, it does have those peaks in brightness. So we preserve the brightest points of reflection. It's basically like a mirror. In the sea, when you're standing on a sea and you're on a boat and you have the sun, does the sun make the whole water glow, all of the body of water, or just one section? Just one section. And that can be a nice little way for you to indicate where the light environment is mostly located, like where it's coming from. Okay, so I'm just going to try to get some of this involved. It's a little bit blurry. Some areas are, like right here, this whole area doesn't get blurred. I blurred it, but it doesn't get blurred. Because it's an overlap. It's one object in front of the other. So this is the landmass in the way of us seeing the rest of the water. So this can get a little sharp. But this goes back to being blurred. Right here, again, more sharpness is required. One object in front of the other. Over here as well. Not as sharp, but it's still needed to make this impact. And that's it. You just have to find the patterns. Blurred, not blurred, one object in front of the other, the rules of depth, the edge work, the rules of edge work, the fundamentals of edge work. I am so tempted to just make a list of all the fundamentals for you guys to remember. I used to say that. I used to say I wish I had a list that I could go through and then just make sure I have everything I need in that list. As a kid, I used to say that. I mean, I don't know how much wisdom kids have, but it's funny to think that as a kid, like it's just training, I knew that there was some stuff I was missing that I couldn't see. So that's something definitely that I feel like all of us can understand, that we all might need that list. So I might start working on it. It might take some time to actually build it though. I'm just going to try to sharpen this area. The issue with balancing focal points is that areas of high contrast, which are areas that are close to the sunlight, can be in the distance. So you have to be able to decide, okay, how much of the contrast formula am I using? And you have to remember the line of sight. The line of sight is really important, the trail of the eyes across the map. So it starts off with this object. This object definitely needs some focal point. And that means that we are using contrast around this object, so both blacks and whites. So that means that our eyes are traveling here to the sun is throwing back light down there, and then we're getting locked inside this painting. So this right here needs just a little bit of suggestion. Hey, this is important. Take a look here. There's someone important here. and hey, my eyes are traveling just along here, and there's going to be just a little bit of extra information just around here. I'm going to close off. The closest tree to me is going to be the darkest tree, but everything behind that, after that, is going to be the least dark. So this tree right here should actually be the darkest one, along with this tree. That one isn't as dark as the closest one. So that's how you start. When you start, like when I start critiquing, all I do is I just follow these lists. I just go through them. And you can, if you wanted to, use the purest black to start it off. Let's apply, and then go down from there. So I'm going to select inverse, and I'm literally going to get a white and just place it there, because everything needs to be under a filter. Everything needs to be separated from these. Of course not in this intensity, of course not, but this is typically what I'm saying. Foreground cinematically is completely separate from the background. It is a completely different unit. So when we turn this layer on and on, what do we feel like is contesting the foreground? So this tree is definitely contesting it. This cliff side right here, it's subject to a lot of bounce light. Which areas are too light, not completely unaffected by this new layer? The background, starting this way. The background fade should have started around this third. The upper third, that's where the background fade should start. Anything below the horizon line or that close to us really shouldn't be anywhere this light, but look at this lightened layer, not affecting it completely. So what I'm going to do is just toss a quick little thing like that. And then I am going to go back and select areas that I want to preserve. Some of the blacks can happen in gradients, so I want to preserve some of these areas. So some of these areas need actually need a black. And I'm going to go to the lighten layer, get a soft brush eraser, and just erase just ingredients, just around areas that are required. This cliff side, this cliff side. It's just back to basic form studies. You just got to go back to those. Alright, so you see now we completely got rid of the contrast. We've established foreground, middle ground, background. We've unified some areas of the foreground. I just have to fix this midground piece right here. Damn it. Just grab some of this value and just borrow some of it for that. And now that we've done that, we can really go in and start thinking about edge work, actual landscape anatomy, which means like trees, foliage, all that business. Go into anything that is a step below. So all these trees right here need to be a little bit darker. And try to give them, like, don't make them all the same size. Trees just don't grow like this unless they were all planted on the same day. They had the equal amount of sunlight the entire time. There's always going to be one tree that's a little bit longer than the rest, or taller than the rest. So you should probably think about varying a little bit. And when you paint landscapes, this is another massive tip I have for you guys. Remember how to randomize. A lot of us don't know how to randomize. A lot of us are really technical. And when it comes to being able to randomize something, we don't know where to start. So randomization is something that isn't really, it doesn't come easy to me at all. Sometimes I'm trying to make random stars happen in the sky, and I end up making them all equally spaced, as if I'm making like some sort of like pattern. So remember, when it comes to landscapes, don't follow patterns. Make everything random. The more random, the better. See, this is, I don't like these how aligned these trees are. They're making a deliberate line of sight. So avoid tangents and deliberate alignments of edges, deliberate lineups unless you want them there, unless you have like buildings. But anything non-man-made that's not man-made should not be an assembly in any way. When you have pillars, yeah, please make them in an assembly, make sure there's perspective. But when you have trees, all the rules go out the window. You have to make sure you have an ability to randomize when it comes to trees. Select inverse. Let me just clean up this river. And you should use layers for environments. You should try as much as possible to have a layer for the foreground separate from the sky layer, and the midground layer separate from the background layer. Just basic layer stuff. Don't give me a layer for every friggin' rock texture brushstroke, but just do give me a layer for every unit of distance. All right. So any landscape related questions, please don't ask me questions about like non-related stuff. Any landscape related business. And then there's also the fact that we're not flattening properly. So when we have, this is going to look weird, but when we have a, deselect, when we have a landscape, like let's say I'm going to select this whole area here, what I would do is I would flatten it even more. I know it looks really weird, just don't mind this bit. But really what I would feel like we see is more of the flat version of the form study. Do you know what I mean? We have a more flattened out, ironed out version in the perspective, because it's stretching across a flat surface. So it needs to feel a little bit more flattened than upright, as if we're right there beside it looking down at it, as if we're in the air looking down at the object. We need to be able to see the object from the side. So essentially, if I were to diagram it, it's the difference between seeing this and then seeing this. Alright, objects on the surface of the earth stretched off across a flat horizon all get flattened like this. Alright? So the further they are, the more of their side we see. The closer they are, the more of their top side we see. Alright, so that's a fundamental rule of perspective. There's just so many friggin' rules, right? And it's hard to know which ones to follow. It's hard to know what you're looking at. But this cliff side, we see the top of it, but we're almost seeing an equal amount of the top side of this cliff, even though it is tilted towards us. You can say it's a slope, but it just doesn't feel flat enough. And I want to see the side of the cliff more than I want to see the top side of the cliff. And don't always say, oh, it was the slope. And that's why we do landscapes and form studies in a landscape environment. It really helps us kind of figure out exactly what we're doing with perspective. But that's a big one that I want to recommend. I can't even seam it in properly because the edit was so extreme. So I can get a better before and after. But what causes the blur in the distance? Is it isometric fog, the light photons that get reflected up in the air? The blur in the distance happens for many reasons. It could be that there is the atmosphere itself could be in the way, not letting the light bounce and make better, straighter pathways to our eyes. Everything just gets blurred, like looking through the. Have you ever looked at something through water, like a little stream of water? Everything just gets blurred. So there's that, the fact that there's like an actual blur in the atmosphere making like a glass-like blur. Then there's the fact that our eyes are just really, really weak. They can't see shit in the background as well as we see shit in the foreground. And I'm just going to give this just a little bit more definition, separating the land and the sky. And then there's the issue of how much of the landscape we're seeing, the placement of the horizon line. Even this first line that you guys throw down has to be thought about when it comes to environments. I'm just going to make this river just like travel in the distance just a little bit more. I don't think I'll get away with that though. And the placement of the horizon line tells us how low we are on the ground. So if we're a small object and we're on a big surface and we have ground, or if we're a big object, I mean a high object or a big object, doesn't matter if you're tall or if you're just flying, your eyes are at the top, floating up in the air. If this person's perspective, if they had a camera, this high person, their camera would look like this. There would be more ground, because if you just have to fill it up, there would be more ground than sky. So we would see more of this than this. So this is someone who's flying. They see more of the sky, Batman, apparently, than the ground. And then they see more of the ground than the sky. I'm so sorry. And then with someone who is very, very small, they don't see the earth on which they are standing. They see more of the sky and the dome around them than the ground. So when you put this in the middle, you're kind of not really helping out either or. You're not helping out the character feel small in a massive environment, or the character feel large in a small environment. So we see this, we use this to create a sense of domination, or control, or height, or elevation, or importance. Something happened where this character is higher than everyone else, and this character is smaller than everyone else. So landscapes usually are trying to make everything look small and minuscule, and just appreciate the grandeur that is in the landscape. So we're almost always taking up more sky in our landscapes than we do land. The canvas, the sky takes up more space in the canvas. You can argue for the other side as well. You can argue that, you know, if it's a landscape, we want to see more of the sky, but you're just going to have to add more of the earth. But if you are asking, you have to ask yourself, how do you want to present this landscape? Do you want to present it through a character or a narrative, like a first-person narrative, or do you want to present it through like an omnipotent narrative where you're in the air describing everything, instead of on the ground? But if we did raise this fella, lower this whole system down and had a little bit more sky and had a little bit more cloud, we'd have a little bit of that feeling. And if we raise this up, we'd have a little bit more to do with the character and their environment and the importance of this character. If we did raise this up, it would mean that there was a character in the foreground looking at this dude saying, yo, I'm going to get that dude, I'm going to kill that dude, and then I'm going to take his throne, and I'm going to kick his ass, and whatever reason people sneak up on other people. And it could be like two hunters kind of just like looking at this guy. Alright? And that could be a reason why we get rid of the sky, because it's no longer about the landscape, it's about this narrative. Alright? So just remember that placing your horizon line does different things to your painting. Alright. And then finally, and always go for low contrast above high contrast. Bring in contrast only where you really, really feel like you need it. This needs to be just a little sharper. It's too much blur. And don't worry so much about treating the objects in the distance like form. Mostly what you should be doing is treating them a little bit more like just like a silhouette, actual clip art. The only time where you're allowed to have a clip art. I call this piece How to Break Fundamentals. Next piece, I'll think more about the narrative. That's the hardest part, Jeremy, is thinking about the narrative. That's the hardest part for me, too, when I'm just sketching and trying to figure out a landscape, just trying to jot an idea down that I had in my mind. I'm always lost when it comes to the narrative, and that's because I realize I didn't spend enough time figuring shit out. You know, actually asking yourself, why am I drawing a landscape? What is it here? What am I here for? If it's just for the sake of the study, I might as well just do a form study version of the landscape. Why am I here? Why am I telling this story about a landscape? It's very different when you tell a story about a landscape versus a portrait. A portrait is much easier to execute. You don't have to design a world. You're just designing one part of the world, and that's the character. But a landscape, you have to design, there's something wrong, something happened, something's up, and we're trying to tell the story. So what I'm doing now is I'm just finding the horizon line, just finding my bearings, and I want to show you that the placement of that rock wasn't based off anything in the surrounding landscape, like it wasn't fitting in. And the rock shape itself felt very man-made or very random instead of organic, because it was an organic shape, so I can't even say that. It just didn't feel like two tectonic plates or whatever they're called overlapping each other to make an amazing looking and weird llooking mountain that looked really, really weird after it exploded, so it looked like two arcs or something like that. Sometimes when volcanoes explode, it's like a woman giving birth. Nothing looks the same ever again. So that's basically what I'm trying to tell you, is that I want to see a little bit more patterns that indicate at one point this was a real mountain, and then something happened to it where it stopped looking like a mountain. Unless it's alien made, you know. If you want to say it's an alien construction and say, you know, it's an alien came and created this, you can go ahead and do that. But I recommend something that's a little bit more mountain-like. And again, we're back to that, teaching yourself the randomization of organic shapes. So organic shapes can get all kinds of randomization to them. So a beginner would do something like this for a mountain. And a professional, I'm going to try to imitate a professional. I'm not a professional, but a professional will try to do something a little bit more like this for the mountainside. Get it? My hand knows what to do. I'm not even thinking, but what from my training, at least with my background and whatever my visual library has, this looks a little bit more like what I imagine a mountain to look like, or imagine a mountain to do. Okay, and then I add little pieces here and there. If I make them too big, then I'm just changing the shape of the mountain. Get over it, alright? Women don't look the same after they have babies. Okay. But that begs the question, where is the baby mountain? This is the baby. When it exploded, it destroyed the earth and created space for, for all this beautiful foliage to happen. Okay, so when we're talking mountain, start off with this piece, Jeremy, and then get into making the arcs, right? So start off with the basic science, and then talk about the arcs. So the arcs did something like that. And this mountain exploded, and then it was a good place to, I don't know, some energy happened, and this person's saying, shit, I gotta travel all the way over there and channel the energy of the sun and defeat the evil warlord of this land. Trust me, narratives help you. It might have been cheesy, but that cheesy narrative would have done more for this painting. Just by being cheesy, just that in itself. And you can do different things. You can keep it this size. Now it's all about blah, 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 blah. And now you have a really, really nice 3-point, the holy trinity of a landscape is having these 3 points. Boop, boop, boop. When you actually triangulate the focal point, the person will always be stuck. They'll just be going back and forth. And maybe add a couple clouds here to be a tertiary focal point, not a primary. These two, this would be primary and this would be secondary. But at this point, you can choose which one you want. If you want this to be primary, it's not going to be this dark, by the way. If you want this to be primary, bring in more contrast and detail and actually draw their staff or their horse or whatever. And then go over here and lower down the contrast here. You can't have the same amount of contrast. There's a depth distance. So what I'm doing now, another thing you can do is shrink this. Toss it off into the distance and have it a part of everything. But I ask you this, now that we've shrunken this, same size all around, same mass. If we weighed this object, and this object, they all look like they weigh the same size. So again, this is in the distance, and it's nearly the same size as this, so this must be massive. This whole arc must be like an entire mountain structure or a cliff structure or something. So ask yourself, is this going to be the size I really want it to be? Is this really the size I want it to actually read as? If I got really close to this object, is this how I really want to compare these sizes together? So that scale thing is another thing you have to consider when you're sketching. Scale is another really, really important thing. So I would actually leave this object as light as large as it is. I think the composition really needs that. I would just blur it just a little bit. Gaussian blur. I don't usually use blurs like these, and I would lay down that fog on the lower half of it, because fog sits on the surface of the earth. It doesn't just float up in the atmosphere. It's a surface thing, humidity and whatnot, or dew, or morning. The fog in the morning. Start sounding like Wordsworth. Motherfucking Photoshop. I'm just gonna lower its opacity just a little bit more. Call this piece out of very fundamental. Why are you always making me laugh, Jeremy? Stop. Stop it. Okay, so I'm fogging out the lower half, and I'm keeping the top half pretty dark compared, because again, this fog sits on the surface. And then finally, when it comes to scale, if I was sketching this, I'd make this cliffside way bigger. Flatten image. I'd make this whole cliff business much bigger, and just make it take up more space. Select inverse. because if it takes up more space, it'll work better to you know, that Holy Trinity I was talking about. It'll make for a more successful, and you can make the character a little bit larger now that he's a little bit close. You can make him all the way large. You can make him full size, plus sized. And let me try to lasso it, in fact. You guys need to learn to draw with your lassos. Learn how to draw with your lassos. It's a really great way to keep thinking about character design, how much character design is invested in this silhouette. So if you guys start learning how to draw with your lasso tool, it'll save you a lot of time in the process and whatnot. You can make him this size or this size. Doesn't matter. But now you have a complete, except for this little piece which is contesting the size of it. These are the same size. It's too much. Don't have one object the same size as the other. It's just try to avoid that as much as possible. Okay? So this piece, just for the sake of the before and after, I'm just going to shrink this. Alright. Doesn't the mountain size imply the arc the arc in the middle is absolutely massive? This right here, yes, I covered that. That's what I'm shrinking right now. Because to have this be this size and it be this far away and share the same, not share the same value as this object, means that this is a very, very large little thing. And what's cooler, I mean, you did put it in a river already, so I guess I can't really complain about that. But what would be cool is if you had it incorporate like more rock structures. How did this arc even happen? Something must have happened. So it seems man-made, or if it's natural, it must have been used by man to get over the river. And please don't forget reflections. They're the best thing in the world. Do you see now how I want this to be a little flatter? Because it needs to sit a little flatter on the horizon line. And a tree is a very minute thing. A tree is a very pointless thing. There's many of them in the landscape. Try not to let the tree take up this much space in the painting. So if we divided it piece by piece, let's see what takes up the most space. So we'll throw red on top of all the areas that are trees. The trees shouldn't be taking up this much space. Foreground should not be taking up that much, so we'll see. If we run a little test. Do you see what I mean by this assembly? Okay. So some more trees. These ones got lowered down in value significantly, so they're not taking up that much space. So that's trees. That's what trees are doing in the painting. Let's think about sky. Alright, so that's sky. It gets to be empty, it gets away with it. Alright, even if it didn't have a single cloud in it, it gets away with it, because that's what we're used to seeing. Okay, so this is how much positive space we have. This is it. This is all the narrative that's happening in the painting. I would rather have more narrative happen in these areas. This is not enough space for the narrative. The narrative should be taken up like this much, and then this should be the sky or other minute details on this. The narrative, if I were to like map it out in graph wise, I mean, like I'm using this as a graph, not landscape or anything, or horizon line. This should be the narrative. This should be secondary empty negative spaces or empty spots like that. And you can use this either on the full sky. You can use this piece and this piece. Maybe I can be a little bit more generous. This piece and this piece, this amount and this amount on the sky, and the rest on the positive space. But no tree should be there without making sense. No tree should be there. And if you say, okay, well, photographers can walk through a mountain and take a picture, are those trees not important? Yes, they aren't important if the photographer is taking 70% of the photograph on a random part of a tree and another part of the tree, and the tree looks exactly the same, and you only have a little bit of a light in the background from the sky. Yes, that's a bad photograph. Right, so remember, what looks like a bad photograph is going to be a bad painting. There's so much you can do right now with the units, but these are my thoughts on the matter. Trying to like force some riverside here, but it's hard to figure out exactly where I'm going to lay it down. But yeah. Any questions at all? Istebrak, so whenever I draw with my lasso, everything looks very pixely. How do I keep that from happening? How small, Libby, is your canvas size? Okay, I gotta make like a shepherd and get the flock out of here. Good night, Hamish. You might want to increase the resolution and DPI in your image. 150 to 300 DPI is safe for me personally. Yeah, thank you, SM. That's exactly what my answer would be. Since before starting a masterpiece, we need to practice our studies, but how do I build up before I draw a landscape? Where do I start out? You just drawing portraits, just learning how, listen everybody, just learning how to treat a face as a building is enough to get you your foot in the door when it comes to landscapes, because you're already thinking about the sides of the cube, and landscape is just one big cube and a bunch of smaller cubes on top of it. The big cube meaning the surface of the earth, and I don't say sphere because we're not zoomed out enough, we're not at a high enough altitude to see the sphere of the earth. Please never draw a spherical, unless it's super stylized and cartoony or anime. Draw a curved earth horizon. It's flat. We're small enough that we can see it measurably flat, because we're that small. We see it segment by segment, flat line by flat line. But yeah, if you're already doing the portraits, if you're already doing form studies, you already have your foot in the door when it comes to landscapes. This waterfall right here, if it was this big and we're this far away, it must be the size of Niagara Falls. So just look at how much we celebrated Niagara Falls and compare the size of a Niagara Falls to a simple little babbling brook stream, or a simple little waterfall across a cliff. They're tiny. They're minuscule compared to Niagara Falls. So try to find real world equivalent and see if you're using this unit right. The biggest, most difficult thing about landscapes is balancing scale. As you guys can see from today's lesson, balancing scale is the most difficult thing. Relative size compared to each other. There's also composition and narrative. That's the most challenging thing before the painting happened, is the narrative, in my opinion. But in the painting, the hard hours, the real sitting there and enduring the time, is learning to balance pieces and their sizes in relation to others. By the way, you guys can't ask your questions. Please make sure you write my name, though, or else I won't find the question. Since before starting the masterpiece, okay. You're very welcome, Jeremy. I will not have Wi-Fi or a computer next week. Is there any way I can turn my floral humanoid early? Yes, you can, absolutely. I'm so sorry if that makes any inconveniences for you. Livy, you're so apologetic. It's so adorable. Please stop being apologetic. It's okay. What you can do is just post it as your final. Just in your community. Just go to the community. And I'm just gonna go find the community now. Go to the community and click on that, and then just post your little thing. Make sure you post it in the Floral Humanites Challenge, and just write for me, this is my final. This is my final submission. It's not, you don't have to post it only on that day. It's not like school. You can post it early, a week early if you need to. Okay, Libby? You adorable freak. Istebrak's a flat earther. Watch out, everyone. Yes, everyone. The earth is flat, and anyone who says otherwise, I will send the Spanish Inquisition on you. The Spanish Inquisition. When's a good time to bring in plein air urban sketching in your study progress? As soon as you need to. Everything, the form is the same in all instances, and all different the different ways it manifests. If you want to try plein air, if you have the resources for that, and the patience for that, and the good weather for that, go for it. The urban sketching, though, you might want to look into some perspective before doing that. So when you want to introduce it, spend some time managing, introducing and figuring out a way to wrap your head around basic perspective. If you're on the ground, you're going to have to learn 3-point perspective pretty quickly. But if you're drawing stretched out 2-point perspective landscapes, and you're observing photographs, try to find the vanishing points in the photograph as well as find it in your painting. It'll help keep your mind thinking in diagrams and thinking in perspective. How often should you do the studies versus the masterpiece? I've been studying, but I'm getting bored. Do I keep studying or try out a masterpiece? Art of Rum. The only thing, you're allowed to do masterpieces, but you wouldn't be allowed if you were my student, like if you were with me privately. The reason why I say that is because I'm there to tell the student what they don't know what to do yet. But if you don't have anyone to tell you what to do, if your community is pretty small, I mean, your community should be big now that you're part of us. A landscape, I mean, a masterpiece is good for one reason, and it is good to show off what you don't know yet. For a student, it's good for one reason. It shows off what you don't know. When you're there painting, you may have finished the eye in 2 hours, but when it came to the hair, you sat there for 6 hours figuring out what to do. If that's a sign you need to go and study some hair. So that's what the masterpiece is good for. So if you feel bored, you want to show off your skill level, why not just do a study that shows off your skill level in that area, and then do a study on the side to kind of balance the fun and the work, and study what you don't know yet. The thing is, you don't know what you don't know yet unless you do it and realize you don't know it. And again, that's why a masterpiece is useful. How would you go about landscaping an alien world? As scientifically as possible. Ask yourself, what's the humidity level? How many stars are in the sky? How many suns do they have? What happens to the shadows? It's pretty much the Earth, just customized. You know, just bringing in some custom paint job on the Earth. That's pretty much what an alien landscape looks like. And always, always, always try to find the equivalent of it as we have it in the world. The world is very beautiful. This Earth is very beautiful and very diverse in its landscapes. You guys can find the exact kind of rock textures you're looking for to make the landscape look volatile and alien. If you want to make it look beautiful and whimsical and pretty, just look up some crazy trees that we have somewhere in the world and look at their shapes, and you can get inspired through them. There is a real world equivalent of anything you can imagine. It's already happened. You can, of course not, people can't fly. I'm just saying that landscape-wise, science-wise, there's an equivalent of it that'll guide you around the anatomy of the object you're looking for. Masterpieces can maybe get you hired. Yeah, definitely, definitely. If you're at the time and place to create some masterpieces, but as I said, as a student, they're only good for one thing. And other than that, they're a distraction. They take up too much time. You try to represent your skill level. You try to force the fact that you have a portfolio that's ready when you shouldn't even be going anywhere near building a portfolio. You should be studying and studying only, and building a study portfolio. There's a final masterpieces portfolio, the final draft portfolio that we throw out there in the world and show our skill level as it has developed, or a graduation kind of portfolio. There's a difference between a graduate's portfolio and a student's portfolio. Just remember that. Don't know if you answered my question yet. Had to walk my dog. Is traditional or digital harder to make landscapes with? I think digital is a lot more forgiving than traditional. But the thing is, with traditional, it's great for students, is because you don't get the layers. So you have to think about pieces and the background, and then work your way to the foreground, which is a great way to think. But digital is very forgiving, and of course, resources-wise, a lot more forgiving. You don't have to go out and buy canvas, and a canvas that is the right amount of size and space. So I'm going to get onto this piece right here, and I just want to show you, this is why doing form studies are a good thing. This front piece of the armrests of the throne, these front pieces, should have been the same value as this, because they're looking forward. Alright, just look at that. The perspective is off, though. You do have a wonky little perspective. The scale is a little bit off. We looked at scale just now. But I don't think it's that close to the wall that it's under a shadow, a cast shadow, but yeah, let me just see real quick. I think it can use a little thingy-majiggy like that. I don't think it's close enough to this. I think this is much further than the chair, so we have the full exposure of this umbrella piece on top of the throne. But yeah, your forms are just a little bit wonky. The perspective is just a little bit off. Scale-wise, you didn't really consider, is this really how much I want this throne to take, like the space of the throne to take up? And why are you presenting the throne in this way? Have you tried other ways of presenting the throne or framing the throne? Remember, you're a photographer of a landscape. When you're drawing a landscape as an artist, you're still photographing. So think about as this chair having already existed in here. This is not the first time you've seen this chair. You've seen it many times in your mind in this exact setup. But ask yourself, how do I want to take this photograph? Do I really want the most important, most beautiful thing and the most sexy form in this painting to be all the way on this half of the painting? You can have it here. It doesn't have to be smack dab in the middle. It can be just somewhere here, and that would have been much better for the throne. Do I really want it to be this size? And why is this important throne, this really, really important throne, that clearly looks like a lot of importance went into it in designing it and making it look this geometric and this precise? Why is it in a broken down cave? Weren't there other instances where it was like this cave was domesticated or built or designed, other pieces of geometry? And that point, you can have like a kind of like a I hate the word juxtapositioning, but juxtapositioning organic patterns and stalagmites and stalactites beside some real geometric shapes. So you could have had like a little hill. And as I said before, a throne is a very important chair, and it's a very impractical chair, and it's there just to be a place that someone can sit and represent their rulership while other people sit around and look at them. Usually it's on a high spot so everyone can see the person equally, and you could have framed it in such a way where you have like these real, and a little bit of light could have been shining on the chair, some shit like that. But as a photographer, I wouldn't be taking this kind of a photograph. It's a very bad photograph. If I was trying to take a picture of something really important, I wouldn't put it on the edge of the canvas or halfway in. And this is dangerously at the edge of the canvas. It's a great painting, it's a bad photograph. But yeah, when you have an edge, you have an edge. You don't dick around with the edge. The edge needs a Sharpie. You're telling me here this is a point, this is a vertice, that's it. There is no blending, there is none of this. If it's an edge, it's an edge. That's it. Even in your painterly brushstrokes, please keep the edges. The edges are not the one thing Impressionism refused to throw out the window, or some of the edges. Impressionism threw everything out. Even anatomy threw it out. But Impressionism knew that if I throw out even the edge work, I keep the lighting and the saturation and the colors. But if I'm throwing out edge work as well, I'm not going to have anything I'm looking at. I'm going to be abstract. I'm not going to be Impressionist anymore. Even the Impressionist movement managed to preserve some of their edges. And you're nowhere near Impressionism. You're trying to pull off a real representational painting here. You're trying to pull off a real realistic painting of something. Something happened. And you're trying to show off what happened. So keep these edges intact. Edges never get sacrificed before anything else. The edges are the last to be sacrificed. Write that back to me. And there's the bounce light over here. And another edge. The bounce light is mostly because this edge, this shadow that we see on the throne is a little bit diffused. And it does have a gradient, but this throne itself is a light object. It's a light-shaped object. It's a light-colored object. So that means that it's going to be, remember the cast shadows own the object cast upon them. Cast shadows belong to the object on which they are cast. So just because the rock is dark doesn't mean its cast shadow is dark. Alright, and then we have bounce light all over this throne. So we would need some indication that it's not completely pitch black. This is daytime. And you've got this light here. So this light is going to bounce on the side of the throne and illuminate it. Just look at that. Hot damn. And then this cast shadow over here, the ground seems pretty light, so this cast shadow might be diffused as well. Damn, baby, look at that form. Turn around for me. Yeah, bend over. Oh, God. Hot damn. Okay. And then we've got these cast shadows, which are pretty sharp, so that means that this cast shadow behavior belongs to the same one light source, one god of the painting. And that means that this is going to be consistent behavior all around. The cast shadow will need to be sharp in other areas to represent that this is a pretty bright sun out. So look at this no man's land white you used. Where is that no man's land on the floor of the cave? It reached in as well. Okay, so is this a huge chair or a tiny cave? Exactly. That's my question. Some more cast shadows off this rock. This rock is also in the way of the light, and it's also casting shadows just like the throne is. Why not? Why is this cast shadow of this rock so unimportant? Is it because it's not as important as the throne? It doesn't matter if you're a king or a peasant. The sun shines on you the same way. Right? Doesn't matter if you're a throne or a peasant, a dirty peasant like this rock. You will still have a cast shadow. You earned your cast shadow. It's a right for all people equally. I'm just fixing this edge. I would like to be a form. Feels like a tiny cave. Yeah, it feels like a tiny cave to me too. This chair should be featured in Form magazine. And that's why you need scale. That's why when we have humans, so you know what, one thing you could do to drive this viewer crazy. All right, let me tell you what you can do to drive your viewer crazy. All right, shift this sucker over to the left, to the right. Sorry, I don't know my left from my right. I don't know if you guys noticed this yet, but I really don't know my left from my right. It's a girl thing. We stare in the mirror. My theory is girls stare in the mirrors for too long, and so they fuck up their that whole thing in their brain. So when they're pressing brake, instead of pressing brake, we press gas. I'm not gonna go into that, but yeah, girls can't tell their. I'm telling all my girlfriends, they all didn't know their left from their right. I would tell them they're right, and they would just turn left. And the same thing happens with me. What was I saying? Yes, shift it over to the right, and yeah, I think I should just shift it as a whole. Shift it over to the right, and do you want to know what's up? I'll tell you what's up. Throw a tiny little human for scale. Don't throw a banana. Just a human. Alright? Look at what that did. That's like, holy shit, what happened? Did someone like hide this chair? Did someone like, break a law or something? What exactly happened out back here that this chair was punished and put away, or someone was hidden, or I don't know, something happened. I'm asking questions about narrative right now. Okay? Do you at least have your ups and downs down? Yeah, I do. But my left and my right is totally fucked up. Totally fucked up. Literally, I would just be sitting, I'm driving, and the passenger tells me, okay, now take a left. I'm gonna go right. That's what happens. That's what happens. That huge rock looks too detailed. It's right in the middle of the entrance and has almost no rendering. Exactly. I think so too. We could make it fit if you had some more rocks. But placing this person here kind of just made a little bit of sense. It kind of carried this, looking outside, and then you're tracked back inside this way, and then you look at the throne. It's not the best composition, but it's definitely an amazing idea. And it's making me ask questions. When was the last time I really asked questions? So what's this throne room doing here? Why does the throne room have no audience? Well, who sat on this throne? Why is it so perfectly geometric? Is this hidden? Is this a tucked away little throne by an alien culture a long time ago? Or does someone carve it into the wall of the cave? Why is it a closed-off cave? Where are its people? What culture did this belong to? Who was the king? Who was the king? And these are the questions you want to make your audience ask. Okay. Do you happen to be left-handed? No, I'm right-handed. Yeah, this is a tiny human. I put him in there for scale, just to remind you how amazing scale can be. Like if you put a tiny human, how colossal everything will feel. But as soon as you erase them, it's like a tiny little house again. Yeah, if everything fails, add a tiny human, exactly. What did you call Assam? Alright, so that's it for today. If you guys want to continue the environments, I'm more than happy to continue environments off into the 16th. But if you guys wanted to, we can do a whole day on noses. So I'm asking you here, did you guys want to do some noses? A lot of you don't know how to draw noses, and I need to update my nose video. So I'm offering, do you guys want to continue with the landscapes and the environments and the thumbnails, or do you guys want to try some noses? Which one is it? So before, not enough bounce light, and then after, just enough bounce light. You could use a lot more, but please sketch out your landscapes so that you guys can find the narrative early, so you're not confused about answering questions like, what's this throne room doing here? Beautiful thumbs, by the way. I really like this one, Jeremy. I really like this one. To make the throne huge. Oh, okay. Noses, 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 environments. Can I make a nose environment? Damn it, Jeremy. Damn it, you gotta give me a warning. Full joke. Yes, you can. Yes, please. Please do, Jeremy. Please do. Even though I appreciate the environment, I'm still trying to learn the face, so I actually love to stay in one topic, but that's just me. Oh, so you do want noses, okay. I'm doing the portrait technique that you had for a class, so yes. Okay. Yes, noses in different angles, yes. So please paint your noses. Make sure that they're done for Thursday. I can't, you guys, listen to me. I can't pin it on the community because I can only pin one thing at a time. So I can't change this because the due date is next week. I want to keep everyone reminded about the due date on Tuesday for the floral humanoid character design. So please remember, I'm announcing it now. I can't remind you guys on the community that Thursday is going to be about noses. So please just remember that, spread it around, spread the word, tell your friends, tell your family. It's going to be about noses on Thursday. So draw me some noses, okay? Nose environment. Nose land incoming. Whatever happened to the transformation grant? Oh, I announced early that the winner has been rewarded, though I just want to make sure that you guys are aware of what it takes to win this, and thank you for reminding me. I did want to repeat that, because I'm probably going to edit the stuff out early on. If you want to be considered for the grant and want to be rewarded, you have to be, oh, by the way, the winner's name is Joseph Cohen. Joseph Cohen. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting. Joseph Cohen is the winner. I really liked his application because of his discipline. He actually showed that there was an already pre-existing desire for him to study, and that's what I look for in these grants. That the winner that I choose, the recipient of the grant, is already in their study environment, is already studying. They're not expecting me to force them into studying, or they're not waiting for someone to force them. They already have the wheels turning. But if you guys want to be considered for the 2017-2018 My Transformation Grant, start your paintings now. Choose something that you're going to use as your before now. It's something current and current representation of your work, but set it aside. Don't delete your studies. Keep them, put them away, file them away, and open them up again next November for the next grant, which I hope has even more rewards and more stuff for me to offer you guys by then. Inshallah, I will. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining today. You guys are amazing. Please remember to finish your Floral Humanoids Challenge character design and upload it by Tuesday the 21st. I don't think I'm going to be doing 2 days of that week on it. Just one day looking at the designs. And the winners get brushes. The winners of not the winner who designs the best design is the person who gets the brushes is the person who makes the best notes. So whoever takes notes well, you don't have to take notes only for this day. You can take notes from today's class and post them, and I can award you some of my brushes. I know it's weird to award you the gift of me, but a lot of people really like my brushes, and I just wanted to give back. So yeah. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining today. I will see you guys on Thursday for noses. Don't forget. Bye-bye.